Hello and welcome to the Garuda broadcast. Today we are going to do a book launch of the book Devayani by author Manjula Tekal. And the chief guest we have is Professor Bharat Gupta. So let me invite both of them on stage. Um, Welcome, Manjula. Welcome, Professor Gupta. It's such an honor for us to have you here at the book launch. And I know for both Manjula and me, it's a great delight and honor that you could be here. Professor Gupta knows no introduction, needs no introduction. People are familiar with his so many talks on the internet, so many of his writings and works and books. He was formerly a faculty at Delhi University and is also a trustee for the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, IGNC. Welcome, Bharat Group. And welcome, Manjula, our author today, our debut author. This is her first novel. She has done others in translation. But I must say, as somebody who was involved with this right from the beginning, it's a brilliant debut novel, and I hope all of us get to read it. So we're just going to go right into it. I'm not going to make this a very long program. Can we start off by doing a book launch? If both of you can hold up the book, and I can do the clapping. Okay, this is the book Devayani. Awesome, wonderful. This is the book Devayani. It has a endorsement from Amish Tripathi on the cover about this rise of this new author. And really, Amish has been a leader in this genre of reinterpreting and rewriting some of our ancient stories. And Manjula has done a fabulous job of taking the story of Devayani and Yayati and Shamishta, a story which is really timeless in so many ways. It has love and betrayal and a love triangle. I mean, it could be a Bollywood masala movie at some level. It's got all of the elements of that going on. Infidelity is happening, and jealousy is happening. All of those things happening, but at the same time, there is the stream of Vedic consciousness that is running through it, and we are learning so many things about the society at that time, and so many lessons in dharma, and so many lessons in what is real, what is aging, the whole process that Ayati goes through. So for me, it was just a wonderful reading. As I got to read it myself and got to help in editing the book, and it was a learning and also very delightful. I'm going to say a little bit about the cover also. This cover started, if you can just hold it up one more time, Manjula. I'm going to talk about this cover. So the cover illustration, people must be wondering what this is all about. Looks like a little masala there also. So this cover started by artist Karan Acharya, actually, who's known very much for the Rudra Hanuman that is being displayed in many of the vehicles. So he did the initial work for the cover, and then it was enhanced by our cover designer Rakesh to get it to its state right now. So there is some artistic play going on in the cover as well, and that ended up really becoming part of that story. So I'm going to give it to you, Manjula, to take us a little bit on the journey. Just perhaps starting off by saying what made you pick these particular characters. I mean, the fascinating thing about what we have, our dharohar, our wealth, is that there are these thousands and thousands of wonderful stories and brilliant characters. And even if somebody had imagined them, I mean, it would be a playwright of some outstanding level of virtuosity. So as real characters or as characters in fiction, they were so amazing. But what made you pick these three characters particularly, and Devyani as the real the main protagonist here on the cover?
Actually, I don't think anybody has told the story of Devyani from her perspective. At least in my readings, I have not come across anybody who's like written about Devyani per se. There's been a lot written about Sharmishta, a lot written about Yayati. and all of them make all the previous authors, creators have made Sharmishta out to be this epitome of love, and Yayati as this very crass guy who is like always extremely selfish and then going after womanizing, and very not a particularly good character. But in my mind, I think that over making it overly good, uh, it doesn't really gel for me. So I had to make them human, and they indeed have bad characteristics and good characteristics, and they're always a mix. They're kind of gray. So I had to bring out that grayness, so to speak, in the characters. And nobody has spoken about Devyani. She's willful, she's manipulative, she's very selfish, and then she plays the victim. All those things are true, but there's a sense of constancy about her. She's always loyal. She's done a lot for Kacha, and then she struggles. The human struggle is like very visible in her character. So I just had to explore this particular thing, and the story itself lends color. Actually, it's very intriguing. And then a lot is happening between Yayati and Devyani, and that doesn't come forth when other people represent the love affair between Sharmishta and Devyani. And in eventually it is Puru, Sharmishta's son, who inherits. So nobody, she kind of gets relegated to the background.
The sound is going off a little bit, Manjula.
Okay,
Yeah, so now it's good. Yeah,
it's good.
yeah,
So yeah, I feel she's been neglected, and I just had to take up her cause, so to speak.
right. Yeah, and I think that for me, the right from the introduction, the book was so gripping because it starts with this relationship between Kacha and Devayani, and Kacha has and and it's like there is dharam sankat everywhere. In some
Yes,
senses, this notion of dharam sankat, it
yes,
constantly comes up, which is the conflict between the various dharmas. There is, the love that Devyani has for Kacha, and Kacha is, of course, constrained by the fact that her father is his guru, and all, so many other things that are happening in the background, the political scenarios, and
yes.
all the many things. So I really like how those play into. So there's the political and the personal, and all of that is playing into the story.
Mhm. Also, Kacha kind of abandons her, and he is indeed a little weak. But when you come right down to it, he also has got constraints. I mean, he has to do the best thing that he possibly can, and then in his mind, he's doing the right thing by abandoning her, because by going with her, he's going to jeopardize his own, plan, so to speak. In addition, he's
Mm.
not going to do a great deal of good for Devyani herself. So that is the thing that is playing out in his mind. So yeah, everybody has got the right. They think they're doing the right thing, and then because of that, there is conflict. Like you put it, dharma sankat.
Yes, dharam sankat, and the other part of the dharam sankat also is that, um, I mean, there is the Devyani is like a complicated character. There's a relationship with her father also,
Mhm.
and the indulgence of the father towards Devyani, and there's the Dharam Sankat on the father's side. I mean, all the way till the end when, I'm not, for those who don't know the story, I'm not going to give away the ending, but so that theme of this sort of spoiled, bratty daughter almost,
Yeah.
is there as well, and an indulgent father. So there's so many elements that are coming into play.
Yeah.
What did you feel about the relationship between those two, between Devyani and her father, who's of course the important rishi?
Right. So Shukracharya is the Asura preceptor, and then he has to do the right thing by the Asuras. He's constrained to do that, and then he's the inventor of Sanjeevani, and then he's saving a lot of lives, and therefore Devas. Oh, and by the way, the novel is set in the backdrop of the Devasura war, and naturally Devas are worried that they're losing a lot of people, but Asuras are like forever recreating, or they're not, they're gaining back people and stuff. Um, So because of that, he has to, I mean to say, the Devas have to send Kacha and all that stuff. Meantime, there's a backstory to, like you said, there's a backstory to Shukracharya. He's gone out to, how do you say, learn or discover Sanjeevani. And
Mm.
then he's doing penance, and Indra, the king of Devas, the Deva king, sends his daughter to basically seduce him to
Mm.
learn the Sanjeevani. And the two, Jayanti and Shukracharya, fall in love with each other, and then they get married. And then they have Devayani. But then Indra gets worried about the whole thing. And then he wants to know the secret of Sanjeevani. And then Jayanti kind of refuses. No, it's not what she's going to do.
Mm.
And because of that, there is a bit of, and then Shukracharya discovers, and then he is worried about, like, what the implications of this kind of a thing is going to be, like, what's the implications of having a Deva wife in the Asura community. So he's worried about that. And then basically Jayanti understands the dynamics and then decides to retreat.
Mm.
But that doesn't have a positive effect on Devyani. And then she kind of feels victimized, as when people are suspicious of her, and then when people are looking at her as the half Deva kind of a person,
And she's
she's
abandoned. She feels abandoned by her
feels
mother too.
abandoned by her mother, and she feels kind of, you know, and because of that, she becomes overly attached to Shukra, and then he also overindulges her. And then that is the start of that, manipulative behavior. So, yeah.
And I find so many that's where I find so many reflections of the contemporary in this as well, where there's so many different kinds of marriages and separation and
Yeah.
all of that that we are dealing with in the contemporary world, and the ancient world is is dealing with similar things as
Yes.
well. I mean, I can imagine somebody who's left as a single dad, and taking care of his daughter, being really attached to her, making sure he's kind of spoiling her, and she becomes a brat. So all of that consequence can happen
Yeah,
today as well.
very
Yeah.
easily. And they don't talk about all these things in the Puranas. I mean, that all these things happen, these incidents happen.
Mm.
You know that Jayanti and Shukracharya are married. You know that after 10 years, Jayanti leaves and goes back to the Deva community, and she becomes kind of an ascetic and all those things. All these things are there. But interpreting as to what might have happened is the interesting part. I mean, trying to live in that thing, you to have the characters in your head and then thinking what they're trying to do, perhaps, is the thrilling part. I mean, the fun part of it all.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, would you like to read us some parts? I'm quite sure people would enjoy that, and everybody do go to garudabooks.com, Devyani, right now, and go and purchase your own copy, because the book and the story is far too interesting and far too complex to be able to fully appreciate it in a few short bites. But we'll still have Manjula ji read a little bit of it for us, and get a flavor for it.
Thanks. um, the book begins like this, actually. Kacha left this student residence that had been his home for almost 5 years now with a heavy heart. He walked quickly, resisting the urge to look back. His scrolls weighed heavily on his shoulders, but he did not have much else to carry, just a few clothes and some food for the journey. As he turned the corner, he finally gave in and looked back, hoping against hope to see a familiar face. As he had expected, there was no one to bid him goodbye. His friends would be wary of giving him an affectionate farewell under the circumstances. And Devyani would be crying her heart out somewhere in the recesses of her home, hidden from everybody's sight. She was very proud, but Kacha knew what she was going through. His eyes welled up with tears, remembering the stormy scene of their parting. He had won the knowledge of the Sanjeevani at enormous odds. It was the most secret of arts, and no one at the ashram had wanted him to learn it. But the Sanjeevani had been his real mission all along. The reason he had left his home and people to come and study under Guru Shukracharya. and staying back now that he knew the Sanjeevani was impossible. The politics surrounding the whole episode was pernicious, and sooner he left, the better it would be for everyone. So when his guru Shukracharya had declared that his education was complete and granted him permission to return home, he was thankful. But of course, he could not go without taking Devyani's leave. Devyani was waiting for him in the pavilion behind the garden that was sometimes used as a classroom. He had always been their favorite, it had always been their favorite meeting spot. Her young oval face was flushed pink, her breathing fast and shallow. When she saw Kacha, she rushed forward and held her hand out to him. Kacha. While her innocently frank expression of affection made Kacha's heart beat faster, it was also what he had dreaded all day. Even as he stepped towards her, he had already retreated in his mind. Somehow Devyani sensed his hesitation. Is anything wrong? Are you all right? Her smile had dulled a little. Devyani, I'm happy to have finished my studies. I am free to go home now. My guru has blessed me. Devyani smiled, returned with readable radiance. Tears of joy shone like diamonds on her eyelashes. Yes, I'm so happy, Kacha. When are you planning to leave for your home? Oh, I have 1,000 things to do. I don't want to be hurried. I have to seek my father's blessings too. But I know you have his blessings, Kacha. I know he loves you like his own son. Devyani chattered on excitedly. Kacha stared at her, helpless. His heart welled with regret and sorrow at what he was about to do. But he had spent many sleepless nights before arriving at his resolve. I know I have his blessings, Devyani. I seek your permission to leave now. But please do not trouble yourself with anything. I am grateful for all you've done for me. There is nothing more you can do for me than to give your good wishes to take home with me. The first discordant note had been struck. What are you saying? Am I not going with you? Are you coming back for me? I'm honored you want to visit my home, Devyani. But should you not seek your father's permission first? Of course, he'll grant his permission. You will have to talk to him soon before you go, anyways. Will we be married before we go? Devyani's voice faltered at Kacha's expression. I love you, Kacha, you know that. I love you more than my life. You're scaring me now. Kacha was at a loss for words. I know you love me too. She took his hand and shook him hard. Say it, Kacha, say it. Tell me that you love me. Of course I love you, Devyani. You've been my friend, my support, and my advocate ever since I came here. I wouldn't be alive without you. You have saved my life many times now. Kacha's tone wavered with guilt, and Devyani was instantly angry as she caught it. That's not what I'm talking about, and we both know it. She snapped. Tell me that you love me. I know you do. Tell me you want me to be your wife. Kacha said in a heavy voice, I do love you. I have received your father's blood, so he's now literally like a father to me. You're like a sister to me. I don't think it is appropriate to think of you as anything other than a sister. Devyani's voice rose almost to a shout. You're obfuscating, Kacha. He saved your life. If you want to be technical about it, his a son-in-law is like a son too. A student is a son too. In the next instant, her tone became pleading. Please, Kacha, you know I will die if you leave me. Don't do this to me. Kacha's face was heavy with emotion. How could he tell her? It was her frightening intensity that worried him the most. That and the fact that Devyani could manipulate Shukra into doing anything she wanted. Kacha was not sure if their love would survive such toxic attachments and divided loyalties. He said, Devyani, I have too much to do right now. I'm not ready for family life. I'm too young. I have too many responsibilities. I need to fulfill them. I need to concentrate on my goals. I need to grow as a person. You're a sister and a friend. You're a piece of my own heart. I care too much for you to involve you in my struggles. Devyani was furious. Kacha, stop evading the issue with such feeble excuses. I want to be part of your struggles, a part of your life. Look into my eyes and tell me you don't love me. I'm not your sister. If my father donated his bodily fluids for some transfusions, it does not make him your father, nor am I your sister. I know you love me. Tell me, Have you never felt anything for me? Every signal from your side made me believe that you loved me. Was I wrong? I could not have been wrong. Tell me, do I have your love? Please. Devyani was weeping piteously now. Kacha desperately wanted to hold her tight and erase her pain. Wrong move. Stay strong, Kacha, he said. Devyani, my dear, have I ever indicated in word or deed that I love you as anything other than a friend and a sister? Have I ever misbehaved or said anything inappropriate? Have I ever treated you disrespectfully? If so, I abjectly apologize. But I need to know. That gave Devyani a pause. Had he ever said he loved her? No. Was he ever anything other than circumspect and respectful? No. Had he misread his signals then? No. 100 times no. A woman would know these things instinctively, wouldn't she? Could she have been so horribly wrong about everything? Devyani stared at Kacha in confusion. Kacha said, Devyani, you are the very best sister a man can hope for. Please give me permission to go home now. You can call me anytime you need me. Something snapped inside Devyani. She would feel its pain in the days and weeks and months to come. But now she spoke with undiluted venom. I hate you, Kacha. You're a cheat. You came here for the Sanjeevani and used me to get it. I feel like a fool. Go, Kacha. But no, you have destroyed me. I curse you that you will never be able to practice the Sanjeevani, that you have learned at such enormous cost. Devyani turned away and ran into the house, tears streaming down her face.
Hmm. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, that scene is so compelling, is so taut with so many emotions, and all of this mixed signals, and was it, did he really love her, did he not love her, and this is like the story of any relationship. Really, it could happen at any time, and that's really what I love about the brilliance by which Manjula has done this book, is that it really feels so contemporary in its flavor. At the same time, it's so true to the ancient tale, and so true to how it's been done. And I'd like to invite now Professor Bharat Group to shed his shed light on this and give us his views and thoughts, and as a scholar of Indian classics, what does it mean to retell it in this vein?
Well, thank you, Sankrant, and thank you, Manjula. It's a great delight to be here at this occasion and to see what a beautiful work you have produced and how you have retold an ancient tale. I very frequently tell my friends and sometimes my disciples also that in India, we were not so much preoccupied with translating, that is, literally translating one work into another language, another Indian language. We were far more occupied with retelling. We retell the same story, and in that retelling, we recreate it and make it very contemporary.
Mhm,
That has been the kind of Indian trend in Indian Vangme or Indian literature for uh, since time immemorial.
mhm,
And I'm so glad to see that you are doing just that you are retelling the story, which enlivens the story, makes it totally contemporary, makes it something which it is supposed to be. It is in one way Puran, that is, it is an ancient story, but this Puran is a living reality within us now. And perhaps this is the crux of Indian experience.
mhm.
So, congratulations to you on that, number one.
Thank you.
Now, regarding how you retell it, and what I see as your contribution, because in retelling, as I said, we recreate, and you have very well recreated things. Uh, you very rightly observed that people were more preoccupied earlier with Sarmishta or with Yayati. Yayati as a character whose desires were never fulfilled, and finally who gave the Upadesh that there is no end to a kama sakti or desire of sexuality, and one would be a fool if one were to go on living one life after another for the pursuit of that. So that has been, of course, the moral of the story. And Yayati is a character who in history has come down as a character without vatsalya, that is, without real care for his progeny, and who uses his progeny to extend something which nature does not allow. Now, that said, the story of Devayani somewhere recedes a little, and you bring it right in, foreground it, you bring it in the center light from her perspective and her suffering. Uh, she comes out, your Devyani particularly, although that's pretty much the Devyani in Mahabharata also, because other references are very terse and small, but Mahabharata has a a fairly large amount, and then there are other texts. The Devayani in your story comes as a woman who is extremely passionate, extremely truthful, surrendering herself to the person she loves, and yet she is kicked back.
Yeah.
You see, there is no, her love is always unrequited,
Yes.
and it is that unrequited love for which there is no justification. So she is a tragic character.
Mhm.
I mean, she's a tragic character in every sense, Greek or Hindu or whatever sense you may like to call it, but she is tragic in the sense that there is no fault of hers for which she is punished, and whatever is meted out to her is uh, is far greater in proportion to whatever small mistake she may have committed. So that's one part of it. And then you go on to show also that when she becomes harmful or when she becomes vengeful, then there is a full justification for that.
Mhm.
And that justification is not just moral, it is something which is more human than anything else,
Yeah.
because she has suffered as a person and others have made her suffer. For instance, the first suffering which is inflicted is political. The enemy, he is the enemy who has come into the camp. He is somebody who is an outsider, and he takes away the things. He does it in a manner in which he, of more than anything else, makes use of Devayani.
Yes.
Now, this could be a very good story for an Arthashastri, somebody who is more worried about the welfare of the state than about human values. But the story, as you tell it, and as in fact, as the even Mahabharata tells, is about the human concern and the human choices. And it is here that Devyani is totally wrong. So she suffers for political reason. Then Yayati does pretty much the same thing. Kach, after all, had some sort of a compulsion. He was, after all, a secret agent, so to speak. If you relate it to the modern world, he was a Trojan horse. He was a secret agent. But Yayati was none of that. So the number two man who comes into Devyani's life is, in one way or another, a person who again uses her uh, and abuses her love for no special rhyme or reason.
Mhm.
And that is a greater wrong than what Kacha did. And you bring it out very beautifully.
Thank you.
And then I see something which you have added in your story. Uh, as far as I recall, in Mahabharata, Devayani persuades her father to curse,
Yes.
to do a sharp on Yayati, and hence, through that agency, he loses his youth. Whereas in your story, she happens to administer a, a sort of a poison or a drug in
Right.
order to take away his youth. And at the same time, you make the whole thing not as a vicious act, but as something she half does. You know, she is not entirely wanting to do it thoroughly. She is not scheming and planning it to full execution. She blunders into it, so to speak.
Yes.
If I read your whole episode correctly, she happens to blunder. She's not really willing. So even at this last point, you show her as a sacrificing woman or as a truthful woman. I mean, I would prefer to use the word truthful because she's truthful to Yayati. She loves Yayati. So she's truthful to Kach, and Kach, for political reason, abandons her. And Yayati has no reason to abandon her, except first he abandoned her by falling in love with Sarmishta. And he always knew the consequences of falling in love with Sarmishta. He is a person with uncontrolled desire. He is somebody who has no control over his kaam asakti. And then he repeats the whole thing by abusing the trust of Devayani. So the story, as you retell, becomes uh, absolutely human, more human. And it slightly reminds me, of another tale from another culture, that is the tale of Medea,
Okay.
the Greek story, where she kills her own children in order to be vengeful, in order to punish her lover. So there is, something like that. But in your story also, we see the justification for doing it because Yayati is abusing her. Yayati is pretty much an uncontrolled man. And although you give, as a matter of fact, you give Yayatis perhaps more than what most people would like to give, you, ac- you attribute to him some sort of a justification for asking to live as a young man so that he can take care of the Rajya, so
Yes.
that he can look after state affairs, that he is not asking youth only in order to have a greater sexual life extended, but also so that he can look to the affairs of the state. So you do give Yayati a reprieve, something which I think is more of your invention. Am I right? It's not found in earlier texts. It is something which you have created.
No,
And
actually, I want to make him human also. I mean, he can't be
yeah,
too bad. So,
exactly.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That you give him credit so that he doesn't become a black villain. He's gray and he's uh, more like all of us that
Yes.
way.
Yes.
More like all of us. So I think by these two devices, you make the story more contemporary, you make the story more real, more acceptable, and at the same time, the story retains its classical vision that sometimes people are caught between two opposing forces
Yes.
which are much stronger than them, and hence uh, they get crushed by the colliding forces.
Mhm.
And sometimes people are to be blamed. So there is Kach on one side who is doing things for political reasons, pure politician, unadulterated, like politicians we see around today. And then there is Yayati, who is again the unrestrained king. So the political power in both cases destroys a highly affectionate, trusting, self sacrificing woman. And that woman, as you portray, is Devayani. So I found the whole character very good. I found her very moving. I read about 60% or so of your novel, and I got this whole thing out. Or maybe one day I'll go back and go through the thing again. The second thing that I want to say is that I see this as a very healthy, rewarding trend, that stories of ancient times in India are now being retold, not just in our languages, but in, let's say, in English, uh, for the larger English speaking Anglophonic world,
Mhm.
the world outside India. So far, uh, the authors in last 30, 50 years, so to speak, they have concentrated entirely on contemporary India.
Mhm.
Or even if they have taken up an old story, I don't want to mention names here of the people or the authors, but you can guess, even if they take a story, ancient Mahabharata tale or something,
Mhm.
the whole thing appears to them uh, non-classical. You
Mhm.
see, they tell the story, which is just a story by reference, but they're talking about contemporary
Right.
India.
Totally. Yeah.
Everything is just as you see. So that's more like a realistic fiction in the European mode of fiction writing.
Mhm.
Realistic writing, making realistic characters of what is happening. Now you take up and you are part of the current movement in which the ancient characters come across as ancient as well as contemporary.
Mhm.
And the stories are being retold in English by modern Indians, which the rest of the world can understand and see and visit the classical world of India and know that these are some of the most ancient values, and these values still are relevant and they live with us,
Yes.
and we live them as other cultures are unable to live their past.
Mhm.
The other cultures, for them, their past is more or less museumized.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, they for them the classical world is a museum world,
Yes.
and therefore they can even lay claim to describing the classical or the museum world of other cultures.
Mhm. Yeah.
See, this is the colonial project that I'm going to tell you your own past. So please listen to it. So, uh, Wendy Doniger would tell us what was Indian sexuality and what was Kama Sutra and what was Artha Shastra. And they do it without any hesitation because they believe that the past is something uh, like a museum collection and they can analyze it.
Mhm.
Whereas you have brought in the flavor, and there are others who are doing it now, which is such a healthy trend that they are retelling stories which are part of their life, their heritage, their thought. So this is an extremely healthy movement, and I look forward to see more and more books from you of that kind, and more books of this kind from other contemporary authors of India. And I would like to see Sankrant publish them also.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you so much, Bharatji, and wanted to just open up the discussion a little bit, and then we can maybe take some comments or questions as well. One of the themes that I always there's two things that also struck me about the way that Manjula has done it, which is that all of the, a lot of times when we are doing kind of some Amachitra Katha telling events or some pop tellings, there is a lot of magic that is added to how that society is described. But really, magic in the Indian context is really knowledge of another level. It is not while there's no violation. There is no violation of the law even
Yes.
at that level. It is
Totally.
just following a different set of laws that other people might not have access to or might not be able to understand. So I really like that aspect of how all of this is a research project. Even the Sanjeevani Bhuti
Yes.
is a research project in
Yes.
this laboratory, which has a lot of PhD level students and a lot of different kind of researchers, and all of this is happening, and there's a political scenario, and so that also makes it both contemporary and also re uh, reimagines the past in a way which is actually probably even closer to the truth and more accessible.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the way she talks about the fluids,
Right,
it's something that's practiced in modern medicine all the time, transfer of plasma and transfer of various organisms from one person to another.
right.
And so it makes it very relevant and very real in the present world. And yet it is Sanjeevan.
Yes.
It is reviving the person, giving life again.
Yes.
Right, right. So yeah,
So
there is a sense of the the magic is really in the power of the effect, and how these people were able to get to that level of understanding of the human system, really, to be able to create something like Sanjeevani. Um, but but it's also very, very, very contemporary. And the other thing that always strikes me really, and I'd love to hear your views on this, Professor Gupta, is this: for all of our ancient stories, in some ways are us, as opposed to the Semitic system, which is very commandment based. For us, it's the Dharam Sankat that really is the importance of it. It's the Dharam Sankat that enables moral reasoning for us. It sharpens our ability for moral reasoning in our own life. So the story is the story, and the conflict between the story is really, and rather than giving us a commandment, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not pursue calm, or thou shalt pursue calm, or whatever it is.
that's a fundamental difference between the prophetic cultures and the Sanatan cultures. A fundamental difference that it is the individual who is responsible for everything.
Hmm.
He or she is responsible for every action or karma, and choosing the right karma at the right time is dharma.
Hmm.
And you decide what is dharma. It is not a law book which will say do this and this is what you have to do at this moment.
Hmm.
And even if you take precedents, like this is what Rama did in this situation, this is what Krishna did, so I should do the same. That is not the Indian way at all.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, we criticize Rama for doing several things, we criticize Krishna for doing several things. There is no question that criticizing them is blasphemy,
Yes.
Hmm.
and that blasphemy is punishable by death. So, you see, the whole ambience is different because I may assess the situation today that I am not going to obey my father.
Right.
Hmm.
And I may say, well, okay, Rama obeyed his father because it was right and dharmic under that circumstance to do it. But today, if I do it, then the result would be opposite.
Hmm.
And there are examples even in our history. For
Hmm.
instance, Bhishma agreed to the desires of Shantanu
Yes.
out of a false sense of loyalty
Yes.
to the father.
Hmm.
And the consequence of that loyalty was Mahabharata.
Yes.
Yeah.
the consequence of that loyalty was not Ramarajya,
Mm. Mm.
because Rama made a right choice, as that was the right choice for that time. But
Mm.
Bhishma made a wrong choice.
Mm.
Obedience to father was not what he should have done.
Mm.
Yet he did it. And
Mm.
because he did something tremendous, so he was rewarded for it, and he became a great brahmachari and a tapasvi and all that. But the result of all that was something terrible.
Mm.
The result of that choice led to finally to all kinds of sterility, all kinds of failure of uh, normal progeny and adharma, and
Mm.
consequently Mahabharata. So the Indian system shows the whole complexity of choices, and the gati of dharma is very subtle, very sukshma. One has to seek oneself. It is not something which can be prescribed by anybody, by a guru or by a friend or by a wife or by a prophet.
Mm.
And this is the radical difference between the prophetic cultures and the Sanatan Dharma.
Very
Because
much
it's
so.
the individual karma, individual brain, individual choice, which is the final. And this is the most pluralistic system you can imagine
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
in the history of civilization.
And in a way, you can also call it the most moral system. And I will say it in this way that it inculcates the ability for moral reasoning at the cellular level.
Yes,
So ev- every particle has inculcated that ability for moral decision making. So
yes,
there can never be a top down order,
yes,
and so the kind of genocide that happens in in the Semitic context and other things from a commandment based system.
yes.
Mm,
The
on
control
the
is
one
not
hand,
external.
yes.
Yeah.
What is not external?
The control is not external. You are
Yes, the control is
self-governing
not
system.
external. The only thing that's happening from the external is training you in this ability for moral reasoning. But ultimately, all that training in the battlefield, in your Kurukshetra, your training is going to show up, and then you're going to make those choices
Yeah,
in the way that
Exactly.
you're going to make.
Exactly.
totally.
So wonderful. I'm going to take a couple of questions here. Let's see. We have Sri Vidya. Absolutely love the book. What are the steps taken by you in making each of these complex characters relatable? Yes, how did you do this magic? How is it that we can relate to all three of them, even though they are in conflict? Even Kacha we can relate to. I mean,
Yeah.
there is something
Actually,
relating.
yeah. So basically, I don't see any of these people as evil people. I don't see any of these people as excessive. I don't see any of these people as doing something terrible or something. We could have done, I mean, I could have done everything that Devyani had done. I could have done
Hmm.
everything that Sharmishta had and so on. And Yayati too, actually.
Yes.
I feel like, Yayati he wanted lots of love,
Hmm.
not, yeah, he had desires. He wanted to rule the world properly. He wanted the love of his wife and so on and so forth. And Devyani was not as unconditional as he would have wanted it. And he kind of had to seek solace, so to speak, from Sharmishta and all that stuff. My point is, though, that each of these characters are relatable quite simply because their background, you just make them human, if you, in some sense, and then, uh, the conflict in the relationships kind of leads you through, and it kind of, it's an organic process. Their characters develop the way they have to develop, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I think
Yeah,
that's the part that's
yeah. If I can add, that's a
yes.
very good part of what she has written. That uh, Yayati is not a man with endless desires only,
Hmm.
because Devyani somewhere doesn't do all that she should do. There is at the back of her mind very often, and that
Yes.
is something that interferes from the past,
Yes.
and there is something very real which makes Yayati uncomfortable.
And
And
dissatisfied. Really, in some senses, dissatisfied in that relationship because he never really feels he has her,
yeah,
completely.
yeah. So this is what she adds, and that's very good.
Yeah.
We've kind of missed out talking about Shamishta and the three characters. I think these two have taken center stage. But there is a whole section on Shamishta, which I also find interesting because, on the one hand, Shamishta comes off looking better in the way that the fact that except from the beginning where she's mean to Devayani and Devayani runs off and falls and all of that. So definitely that's a trigger point. But the consequence she pays for that is huge. Literally enslavement
Yes.
is the consequence she goes through. And then do we blame her for falling in love with Yayati?
Not
Again, it's
He's the man of her dreams, so to speak, much more than Devyani's.
yes,
He is the guy that she has always wanted,
right.
and that man is actually her best friend's husband. It must tick like she must be
Right.
burning up with that jealousy. So
Not only best friend's husband, best friend who's literally enslaved her,
yes,
whose maid she is.
yeah, but that is the thing. Devyani and Sharmishta share a relationship. They are very close.
Right.
And Devyani expects loyalty from her friend. And somehow,
Mm.
when she feels cheated in that, she's like, oh, everybody is out to get me kind of a mode. She
Mm.
gets into that
Mm.
victim mode. And
Right.
she
Which was
reacts,
already
disproportionately.
flavors of that had already been there. Like flavors of the victim mode had already been there because of
Yes.
her mom leaving and just gets heightened. So I'm just going to take this one last question. I read this story in Amachitra Katha in my childhood. What's new here? I think it's a rude question, but sometimes it's worth taking.
No, it's a
We
very
have been
valid
talking
question.
about what is new
Let
here.
Bharatji, who just read it.
We are talking about what's new here for last half an hour.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think the way I would say is, you can watch a little cartoon of the Mahabharata, or you can read the Mahabharata, and then you can ask what's new here. You
yeah,
cannot. It's really, there's no comparison. So I love the Amachitra Kathas. I grew up on the Amachitra Kathas, but the kind of subtlety and the complexity and the all that is going on between the relationships and the backstories is something you're never really going to get from a little children's cartoon book. And this is what Manjula has done so skillfully and so beautifully in Devayani. I'm as the publisher, as a reader, as Garuda, it was really a joy for me to read
And
the
the
book,
editor.
and the editor, an honor to be an editor of it and giving a lot of feedback. And then just I really, it's my great wish that everybody buys a copy of this, and we have many more coming from Manjula's pen, because I think we will all be the better for it. So
Thank you.
indeed.
thank you so much, Bharatji, for coming and joining. I think there's one more question. Shall we take it in? Yeah, I think under the hour we are getting.
Yeah. Thank you. So basically, I want this story to be contemporary enough that people actually want to read it. My own generation, my children's generation, they want to read it. The problem with reading ancient stories is that they're very instructive, but they're not relatable in the sense, they're somehow buried in the scriptures. So you think of like, okay, so it is divine and it's old, it's very nice, instructive and all that stuff, but it's not relatable. So if you make they kind of, they understand it is actually very important too. Unless I make it human, they won't be relatable per se in some sense.
Can I
Thank you.
just make one comment here? Uh, about Hindu or Sanatan culture is that whatever is God or Divya is also absolutely human as well. They are all sagu.
It's all that play of it, and even equally important. Let's make this a big bestseller and launch a new star, Manjula Tekal. Thank you so much, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Professor Gupt, for enlightening us and honoring us by your presence. And hopefully, we will continue this dialogue. Thank you
My
very much.
pleasure.
Thank you.